Big news to discuss today with a couple highly respected mid-tier companies in the mining space coming together in a recently announced merger of equals. Rick van Nieuwenhuyse of Contango Ore and Shawn Khunkhun, CEO of Dolly Varden Silver, are here to discuss the proposed merger of their two companies. Contango being an active high-grade gold producer operating in Alaska, and Dolly Varden, of course, being owner of one of Canada's premier silver-gold exploration stories. Rick and Shawn, welcome to you both, and yeah, thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Yeah, good to be here, Matt.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, nice to see both of you again. So just jump right into it, right? First question, and I'll start maybe just with a bit of my perspective, because there are some obvious synergies here, right? There's a lot of reasons why when I heard this news, I thought this made a lot of sense for both companies. Contango, from my perspective, you get scale and you get some silver exposure, or increased silver exposure. Kitsault likely is considerably more substantial than the existing 3 Contango core projects. And Kitsault fits very nicely into Contango as a farther term sort of flagship anchor project. And Rick, please, if you disagree with any of that, take your time and tell me why I'm wrong, so to speak. And then on the flip side of that, right, Dolly Varden, premier exploration story, now gets a very clear path to production and are now in the hands of serious, proven, seasoned mine builders. And so with my editorializing out of the way, I might ask you, gents, and Rick, I'll start with you, and Shawn, hand it off to you after that. But please I'll ask you both to explain and justify this merger from your own individual perspectives. Why is this accretive to your company specifically? Rick?
Okay, so I think I can start. And silver just passed I think $63. So for Contango shareholders, gaining exposure to silver is very significant. We don't have silver in our portfolio of any consequence. Our geology is basically 1-to-1 ratio of gold silver. So acquiring a company that has a high grade silver focused resource of high quality that's on the water, very similar to our Johnson Tract project, which is high grade gold but on the water. We see putting the two companies together and building a North American precious metals focused company that can take advantage of our direct shipping ore model. We just think that's a beautiful thing. Contango had a great 5-year plan, and I think I would describe this transaction as transformational and providing shareholders with a 20-year business plan. And that's I think that's it in the essence.
Yeah, and Shawn, your own thoughts?
Yeah, look, in M&A transactions, I see companies that get put together that have mines in Africa and South America, and there's I often don't see the rationale or the synergies. And biggest competitive advantage that we have is we've got geographic consistency. These are companies that, as Rick was building Contango over the last 5 years, Contango has become a dominant company in Alaska in the producer, developer, explorer category. And simultaneously, Dolly Varden was becoming a dominant player in the Golden Triangle. So for me, when I think of our investors, and ultimately, Rick and I are working for some of the biggest precious metals investors in the world. On his side, Alyeska, Franklin, GDXJ. On my side, it's Hecla Mining, Eric Sprott, and the Silj. What our investors wanted from Dolly Varden was silver and security. Through our exploration and our acquisitions, we brought in some gold with Homestake, and we've tagged in some big silver discoveries and some big gold discoveries in the Golden Triangle. And so what I celebrate here for my shareholders is we're staying consistent. We're staying in the north. We're staying in safe mining jurisdictions. We've got 2 great boards that are coming together that have complementary skill sets. And, mainly from the Dolly Varden perspective, we are now giving our shareholders exposure to production, a very, very, very healthy balance sheet, in future cash flow. You mentioned the expertise the Contango team has and the track record for driving value and to shareholders and advancing projects. So I just think this is one of these deals that make a lot of sense. And as Rick and I, we've known each other, from a bit of afar. We met maybe 10 years ago, and we've gotten to know each other a little bit on the circuit. But in this last 4 months, every day that goes by, I feel more confident. And then particularly to see how the markets responded to the transaction, and I'm already seeing liquidity come into both companies and share price appreciation. I think it was the right time for both companies. Again, Rick said this, we now have given our shareholders decades of security, a plan. And then I think what's really exciting when I look into the future, where can we now leverage this bigger platform to continue decades of Morse growth?
And yeah, clear timelines starting to come into play here. But Shawn, you kind of mentioned it. I might circle back to it though. And my next question is sort of the origin story. How did this come about, right? You mentioned you kind of known each other. It's a small circle, right? You've known each other for a while now, or known of each other. But how did this come about? Who broached it to who? And again, I mean, I can, it does make sense. Contango, I know you're always looking for, another project to fully flesh out your DSL model timeline. And Dolly Varden, I know, is an exceptional project. M&A is always a natural endpoint for these projects, such as Kitsault. But how did this particular partnership come about? What's the origin stories there? And I guess, Shawn, if you want to lead that off, or Rick, whoever has thoughts on that one.
Well, look, and before we even got together, I just want to say, as we were out there independently growing our businesses over the last 5 years, Rick has brought assets into Contango. This is not his first, deal for the shareholders, right? He's had a track record of, bringing in accretive acquisitions, and so have we. We've done 5 acquisitions at Dolly Varden. So, in the mining business, you've always got to be out there lifting skirts and, and seeing what's out there. But it's kind of interesting how we got together. As both companies were looking to process their ore, that had circling around a lot of the same ponds. And as we did that, we got to take a deeper dive in each other's projects. And it was really our shareholders that were saying, look, guys, like you guys should get together. You'd make a great team. We've got complementary skill sets, complementary shareholder bases. You're looking at a map here. We're neighbors. And I guess, just going back to Dolly buying production and Contango buying silver, but it's something that we've been working really hard on for the last 4 months. Our technical teams have done a serious deep dive and property visits, and these are we hired got independent written fairness opinions from multiple consulting companies. So there was a lot of work that went in to ensure that this was the right deal for both sides. And I just want to make, something we really haven't touched on. We've done some media, but we really haven't touched on the extensive due diligence that was done with all the independent analysis, and on every metric, there was unanimous support. And, we had shareholders to volunteer to do voter support agreements, locking up their shares, voting for the transaction before we even hold a shareholder vote. Like, we're coming into this with 22% on each side with voter support agreements, and indications from another 13% respectively on each side saying they're going to vote in favor of the transaction. So, and then unanimous support at the board level. And as you can see from the market's reaction, the market likes the deal. They like Rick, they like the assets. And it doesn't hurt when you have $63 silver and $4,200 gold.
I just add, we both companies, both companies have been acquiring things, and so we both had lists of, here's a group of companies or assets that we would take a look at, and we were both on each other's list. So I think it was somewhat inevitable.
Actually, yeah, that reminds me, when we did first talk, Rick said, "Oh yeah, you're on my list."
Could be. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah. Well, and I might actually, Rick, I might flip this to you, because again, I know, I mean, working with Contango and following you gents for a while, and following you folks for a while, I know that this is an aggressive part of your plan is continue to flesh out your mine plan, your model for the next, like you say, going from a 5 to 20-year plan. And so I might ask you specifically because you are willing to kind of go farther reaching to find the right project. Why Kitsault Valley? Why Kitsault? Why Kitsault? Why was this the one? What was the clenching detail that made it take first place for you? I assume there, as you kind of just referenced, there are other projects you're eyeing. What did Dolly Varden offer, or what does it have that others didn't that really kind of pushed us across the finish line for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a number of things, and the map shows. I think one of the most important aspects. It's on the water, and so when you're on the water, you're close to infrastructure because shipping and barging are the cheapest forms of transportation. So and it's obviously meets the other criteria. It's high grade, and it's a silver centric high grade precious metals deposit. So it's very complementary to our gold focused precious metal rich deposits. So um, I think those are two really important things. But and obviously Shawn and his team, they demonstrated they know what they're doing. So and every every jurisdiction has a way of working, and so you want to have a team that knows how to work in that environment, and so that's an important aspect of it. And, we both have small teams, so we're not like flush with people here. I think when we combine, we'll have a total of what, 15 people, something like that. So um, and I'm sure we're going to add a few more people. But the other thing is, Shawn didn't bring a broke ass company. Shawn's been very successful at raising money, and so when we put these two companies together in say March, we're going to start with $100 million in the bank. Our Mancho operations for life of mine are going to generate about $100 million a year. It's going to fluctuate. Next year, we've always been guiding is going to be the low year, but 27 and 28 and 29 are going to be really good years. So yeah, it's a well-financed company going forward, and we've got an execution plan. We've got the team to execute. We've got the dollars to execute. And there's going to be just a tremendous amount of news flow and catalysts and milestone achievements as we walk through the next few years. And if you're familiar with the Contango story, my 5-year plan was to build our production profile in gold from this current roughly 60,000 ounces a year of production from Mancho, adding Lucky Shot, adding Johnson Tract, building us up to a 200,000 ounce a year production. Well, now, not only can we add a bunch, another million plus ounces of gold, but we're adding, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 million ounces of silver, and a production profile on top of the gold with, 4 or 5, 6 million ounces of silver. So, and, and again, it's all in the water. It's all open to the DSO model. And again, you've got the team, you've got the dollars to execute, and we've got uh, we, I'll say it again, we've got $63 silver and $4,200 gold. It's a perfect environment, perfect storm.
And Shawn, I might sneak a quick one in here. Sneak a quick question in just to you. It's not a takeover. It's a merger of equals, as was phrased. And I just wanted to see from your perspective that how do you, and you can just tell me if shareholders come to you with this question, what your answer is to them, but maybe people would typically expect there to be a degree of a premium involved, right? For a company that's being, yeah, it's like I say, it's not a takeover, strictly speaking, it's a merger, but typically, generally speaking, M&A, there would be a degree of premium. Can you just explain, maybe, Shawn, from your perspective, why there wasn't a premium attached to this deal at all?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And, I just want to talk about Dolly Varden's history. And Dolly Varden, before I took over, was subject to two hostile takeover attempts, where there was two companies that came in unsolicited and unwanted, and the management and the shareholders had to fight them off. It was at a time in the market where the valuations in the sector were very low, and so there were two opportunistic companies that essentially tried to steal the company. And so when I came in, the message that I heard from shareholders was, Shawn, please don't sell this company too early. we're early in the cycle. What we don't want to see here is we don't want to see you taken out too early. And so the reason there isn't a premium, the reason this is a merger of equals, and actually technically the premium is being paid by Dolly Varden. It worked out to, I think, about 7% when everything was said and done. What we're doing is we're staying true to our shareholders. We're staying true to the shareholders that want us to unlock the value of these projects. In the history of the Golden Triangle, the consolidation that we've done, the discoveries that we've made have only been possible because of the consolidation and picking up contiguous mineral claims. We've methodically gone out and restored all the surface rights and in some cases royalties and brought this big land package. The discoveries we're making, for example, at the Wolf Vein, previous operators couldn't make because they didn't own the contiguous ground. So for me, what I'm doing here is I'm not selling out early. And instead of trying to sell out to a larger entity, which I think, if you look at other companies that have been taken out, you look, for example, in Nevada, I can cite different districts where companies that are bought for $150 million, where they could have got 600 or a billion had they held on for those future discoveries, for the future re-rating in the gold price. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to build the next mid-tier silver and gold producer. And so this is not a takeover. This is a merger of equals.
No, well said. And maybe I'll kind of take a half step jump just into shareholder response, shareholder feedback. I think, as I said, there are obvious complementary pieces here, obvious synergies that make this make sense. And based on informal online sort of sentiment barometers, I think most investors, seem to be fairly accepting. But I was just wondering, I mean, again, and Rick, I'll ask you to lead off, and then Shawn, you can finish off as well. But then just, has there been any pushback? And I guess if there has been pushback or questions or concerns that are being raised to you, maybe can you just explore what those are and then maybe discuss just how you have responded to those or try to help ameliorate those concerns as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. And from our side, our shareholders have been very responsive to the positive. They're viewing this as a very smart merger, and a merger of equals. It's a 1+1 is 3 or better, and they see it as a launching platform for further consolidation in the Golden Triangle. There's other opportunities here. I said, Shawn and I, when we came together, we were on each other's lists. Well, we still have the rest of the list to go through. So this slide here is a good one. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what we're doing here, and that's where we want to go. We're going to put these two companies together, well financed, with ongoing flat cash flow from Manh Choh, and an asset base where we can grow to 250,000 ounces of gold production over the next 5 years, and 4, 5, 6 million ounces of silver production. That's better than Hecla. So that's what we're building here. And Hecla is a $10 billion market cap company. We're serious here, and I think our shareholders are seeing this as a truly smart merger of equals transaction that's going to continue to add to shareholder value as we execute. And again, we've got the team, we've got the money, and we've certainly got the precious metals, gold and silver prices to wins in our sails, so to speak.
And yeah, Shawn, over to you. Any sort of pushback or how you're kind of addressing potential concerns in the market?
Yeah, listen, we've got some very intelligent shareholders. I think one of the reasons that both companies have been successful is we've had shareholders that understand what it takes to build a business, the time, the capital, et cetera. So, our shareholders have, as they indicated with their voter support agreements and their indications to support the transaction and the market's reaction, it's been super positive. But I want to focus on the minority that have come to me and said, Shawn, we bought you because of your silver. And, you're buying more gold here. Can you explain this to me? And we've had some intelligent conversations around the strategic rationale. And all I can say is for those shareholders, number one, we've got a new MRE coming where we're going to increase the silver significantly. And we'll be on about a 50-50 silver to gold basis. But more importantly, by leveraging the cash flow, we'll be able to get the silver out of the ground. And so, when we've had those detailed discussions, the shareholders have come around. But I will say, what I was told early in my career, Shawn, you're not selling ice cream. You're not going to make everybody happy all the time. Rick and I are going to we're going to do it, right? Like we have done it, and we're just going to go out and execute our plan. And I think that'll convert any skeptics.
And maybe just as a follow-up, and it's a matter of maybe it's a matter of opinion or a fairly subjective question, but Dolly Varden exploration story, much more active and engaged retail audience. And this is a similar question as I say, I apologize. Whereas Contango, by comparison as a producer, more so the land of your institutions. As I say, as a bit of a follow-up to previous question, is there a potential for tension? Because I know that making sure that the shareholder registry as it unites and making sure that people are on board with the vision and supporting the new merge co is critical. Is there potential for tension there, Rick? Do you think as you're kind of onboarding more retail, or for Shawn as well, where maybe the retail is people are there for the juice of discovery, and now this is a production story? Are those concerns that have been brought to mind to you gents, or no, not so much?
I'd say not so much in the sense that I think they're very complementary. It's interesting the parallels between the two companies. Shawn started at Dolly about 5 years ago or so, and I started at Contango about 5 years ago. We've built our companies with very different shareholder bases, as you point out, but they're very complementary. Contango started as a friends and family, what I described as a friends and family company, but we've gained a lot of institutional support because we were going into production, and that's what institutions want. But they also want growth, and so we'll have a company here that will continue to produce gold, will continue to advance its projects from inferred ounces to indicated ounces, and then bring those in with a completion of a feasibility study into production, while we continue to explore. Once we get underground, and I'll give you an example. So we're drilling 18,000 meters at Lucky Shot now. So we're taking our very, very modest 100,000 ounce resource at Lucky Shot. We're going to grow that to 400,000 or 500,000 ounces in the next year with the 18,000 meter drill program. Then we get the engineering team working on subsetting that 400,000 or 500,000 ounce resource into a 250,000 ounce reserve using the DSO model, and work out an arrangement with either Fort Knox or someone else. We've got a couple of other folks we're talking to as well, to where to process the Lucky Shot ore. So that moves it up the Lassonde curve and over the top of the Lassonde curve and through the Valley of Death very quickly, while we're doing the same thing at Johnson Tract. Once we get underground at Johnson Tract, we can finish the drilling to continue to explore the down dip extension of Johnson Tract, which we can't do from the surface because the mountain just gets too steep. So, we're adding ounces there, and we're completing a feasibility study there, and we're doing exactly the same thing at Kitsault. What I appreciate about Kitsault, and what I think maybe one of the things we want to emphasize, is it's a string of pearls. The Torbit project, which is connected by a road to the water, it's only 20 kilometers away. I don't even think it's 20 kilometers, maybe 15 kilometers away. That road can be upgraded for not a lot of cost. It's a historic mine, so it's a brownfields project. It was already a mine once. That's a lot easier to go permit that than a brand new mine. So all those things just kind of come together to give you a very complete story of production, of growth, and of continued exploration success, because we've got 4 districts that the combined company will control. The Tote District and the Montreux operation, Lucky Shot, the Willow District, Johnson Tract, and the Kitsault, which is in a very productive corner of the Golden Triangle. So, yeah, I think there's opportunity for growth both from the drill bit from exploring, but also from going back to Shawn and I's list of potential projects to acquire and continue to grow the combined company.
Very good. And yeah, Shawn, over to you. Like I say, a bit of a fairly similar question to the previous one, but just do you foresee any potential sort of tensions or issues with that sort of retail transition in this company?
We see it as an opportunity. Capital and liquidity and, your share price appreciation being used as a currency are as important as the economic opportunities of these properties, right? You can't have one without the other, and you can't move the projects forward without that. And so, what I see here as an opportunity is, and we've seen it already, as the volume has spiked for both Contango shares and Dolly Varden shares. We're seeing investors embrace what's coming, and so I was involved with a company in the 2000s that was producing, exploring, developing, producing that, and you attract two different types of shareholder. You attract your shareholders who want the business, want the cash flow, but you attract your shareholders who are looking for growth. So I see it as a huge opportunity, and further to that, I don't know how Rick and I managed to do this, but we've gotten great shareholders, great institutional shareholders, great strategic shareholders, but there's zero cross-pollination. So it is the perfect marriage from a pro forma shareholder base.
Yeah, when we say we have support agreements, voting support agreements from 22% each company, it's purely coincidental that it's the same number, but it's very interesting. And then Shawn said, "Well, but I've got another 13 that for a variety of reasons can't sell or can't sign a voting support agreement, but they told me they support the agreement." And I said, "Well, I have actually the same number." So
Yeah, numerology. There, you guys are on the right path, eh? Yes, right. And so, Rick, well, I'll transition here, Rick, and I'll ask you about the DSO model, and I'll follow it up, Shawn, asking you just about BC as a jurisdiction. So again, Rick, I mean, how does this fit into or evolve beyond your current DSO model? Obviously, a core part of this has been, and what I think is intelligent, is working on tribal land or otherwise simple land tenures that you can bypass a lot of hitches and hiccups along the way, and I think that's intelligent, right? So is moving into BC then with more complex Indigenous land claims, sort of a reputation recently for more complex, lengthy BC permitting. Does that still line up with your current DSO model? And I guess maybe as a follow-up, is this sort of a clear demonstration that you are comfortable with where Dolly Varden is situated in terms of jurisdiction and BC generally?
yeah, I'd say I'll just start with the map again. So on the water, that makes the DSO model work, providing you have grade, and Dolly Varden assets certainly have grade. So with regards to First Nations, I've worked in BC. When I ran Nova Gold, we had the Galore project. We built a very strong working relationship with the Tahltan. In fact, we helped the Tahltan set up their sovereign fund, and it's it's a very, very healthy sovereign fund today. Shawn and his team have a very close working relationship with the Nisga'a, and so Kitsault's on Nisga'a traditional lands. They have a good working relationship with the Nisga'a. The Nisga'a are a very they're a very well organized group, and they're very industrious. They like investing in mining projects. I think they're in the process of acquiring the Port of Stewart. So there's a lot of synergies and business opportunities with the Nisga'a. And so I see it as a huge win. And again, when we think about consolidation and moving products around, having a First Nations that owns the port is that's a beautiful thing. That's a win-win in my book.
Shawn, over to you. Do you just want to kind of walk through BC as a jurisdiction and where you see it and how to navigate it effectively that maybe will help this sort of DSO model in terms of accelerated timelines continue?
Yeah, look, for me, being born and raised in BC, I started working in BC post 2017 with with Pretium's Brucejack mine going into production. I saw a discovery get permitted, a mine get built, power get brought into the area. In and around the same time, there was an organization that was formed called the BC Regional Mining Alliance. It's a partnership between the Nisga'a, between the BC government, between companies like Dolly Varden. I'm actually a director, the only corporate director of the organization. And so, look, BC permits mines. One of the most successful Canadian precious metal story has been Artemis, which is the Blackwater project in BC. So in British Columbia, like anywhere, it's all regional. And if you're respectful to water, if you're respectful to the communities, you get your permits in a timely manner. Newmont feels very comfortable. They've come in and they've subsequently bought the Brucejack, and they're operating not only at Brucejack but also at Red Chris. So BC is home to the biggest mining companies on the planet, and we've got some very, very industrial First Nations partners with modern treaties in place. And to simplify it, I think there's one word that sums it up, and it's certainty. That's what our partners bring. They bring certainty. This is an area that's been producing since the 1890s. And the way we're able to plan is we're able to plan not for the next decade, but really for the next century. And that's a unique opportunity. And again, great infrastructure, great support from both government and community. But the key for me here is the geological opportunity. And since the certainty has come in, since those modern treaties were signed in 1998, it's led to 150 million ounces of gold being discovered and 1.2 billion ounces of silver.
Very good. And so we were nearing the end here, gentlemen. Just a couple of questions left, and Rick as the proposed CEO and Shawn as the proposed president of this new merge co of the new Contango Silver and Gold. Is this it for M&A? I think you've said it well a couple of times, Rick. It went from a 5-year mine plan to a 20-year business plan, and I totally agree, right, that you're seeing this very serious approach to making sure you have predictable ounces for a generation now, effectively, right? Is there need for further acquisitions, and how would you justify that now that you probably basically do have 15 or 20 years of mine life kind of baked in? Is there further M&A that you think is on stake or on tap?
Yeah, I think eventually, I'll say eventually, yes. We want to get the shareholder vote done. We want to get Shawn's mineral resource estimate, completed for I think he's still got 80 holes outstanding. But there's 200,000 meters of drilling that's not incorporated into their last resource estimate. So those are priority things. Meanwhile, we continue to advance the drilling project at Lucky Shot and the work we're doing to largely permitting at Johnson Tract right now, but next summer we plan to start building road. And, those are kind of development stage things that you're doing, right? And so I'd say that, and Shawn's mentioned this before, that bigger is better. And, we're over 100 combined, we're like over 100 million US market cap. And that's going to bring ETF buying. We're on the JDXJ. We're part of the Russell 2000. Shawn's on the silver indices. That passive investment is going to result about $50 million of additional buying of our combined stock. So that we think that's going to result in a re-rate, and that may be the time to start looking at other M&A opportunities.
And yeah, Shawn, an opportunity there for any additional input there, Shawn, from your perspective?
Well, I think between Johnson Tract and Kitsault, these are big systems, and I know we haven't found the extents of them. So I think there's a lot that we could do with the existing portfolio. So I think it'll have to be a question of, if we see a company that doesn't have the same access to capital or is going through some hardship, but it's not necessarily a need to have, but if it's a nice to have, and if it makes sense, we'll do the deal. But I think based on, a 500,000 hectares of ground at 4 mining districts, I think we got our work cut out for us right now.
Yeah,
I just, maybe just add, Matt, just as an example, when we acquired High Gold, we bought a 20 million Canadian market cap company for basically 30 million US. And in a short period of time, a little over a year now, we've demonstrated that, in today's precious metal environment, the net present value of that project is over $600 million. And so, if there's opportunities like that, hell yeah, we'll do those kind of things, because we know we can add lots of value. But we like high grade. I think we're gonna stay focused on high grade, and there's plenty to do in North America. And as Shawn says, we've got lots to do on our currently 4 controlled mining districts.
And I just want to touch on that point. I would argue that Johnson Tract alone should demonstrate $500 million of valuation really in this market. And I think it's a broader conversation how, despite $63 silver and $4,300 gold, the equities are not, they're trading as if the gold price was a third or half of what it is, and the same with silver. So I just think the market needs to come up, but at the same time, as that whole revaluation is occurring, if we can peg something off now and we are trading at a premium on a relative basis, we'll look to grow.
Yeah, the two-headed beast of market and geology, eh? Shawn, I'll ask you to lead this one off. My understanding is there are now plans for a TSX on the big board, TSX.NYSE dual listing. Contango, to this point, you've avoided a Canadian ticker, and the venture is Dolly Varden's home exchange. But my understanding, Shawn, is that currently or recently your own NYSE ticker volume is starting to comfortably exceed Canadian volume. Is this now basically a U.S. company? And maybe more generally speaking, just for sort of the edification or education of the listeners, what are the disadvantages or advantages that come from listing primarily in the USA versus in Canada, or dual listing? What are the sort of differences, good or bad, that you see in those jurisdictions from your perspectives, Shawn?
One of our goals after the merger is complete is to upgrade to the big board in Canada, and I think our rationale there is a lot of the indexes and indices will come in and pick up ownership of the company, and so it's going to give us more liquidity, an enhanced profile for institutional investors and ETFs. I think there's a big advantage to be dual listed, so you're getting exposure to the Canadian market. But look, the reality is, over 50% of the world's capital is concentrated in the United States, 90% in the basis in North America. But the big opportunity for Rick and I is to go out and share this value proposition all over the world. As we're speaking, there are European institutions that are buying the companies, and there's a lot of funds that are being created in those jurisdictions and in places like Southeast Asia that want to get exposure. So I think the big opportunity is by being listed, whether it's TSX Big Board or NYSE American. Every investor globally could come in and participate.
I'll just add, Matt, that we had our launch when we launched the announcement of the merger on the SIX platform. We had lots of people on the call, obviously, and what was interesting is Romeo told us that we had every continent represented except Antarctica. It was, we've got shareholders in Latvia, we had people from Andorra on the call. So it's a global business, and it's a global. There's interest globally in investing in gold and silver, and we're creating something new here. As we showed previously, the only other company that sort of has the goods is Hecla, and of course they're a $10 billion market cap, and we've got a lot of work to do to get there, but we have the goods, we have the team, and we have the capital to execute. So that's what we're building here.
Yeah, Shawn, you're on that call with SIX, you mentioned you had some friends that were touring Alaska or Antarctica. Did they manage to make it to a research station to spread the good word? Not yet, eh?
We're getting there.
Yeah. color the map, eh? Final question, gents. Thank you for your time. Deal won't close till Q1 of next year. Shawn, I'll ask you to start off, and Rick, you can close it out. But maybe just take us through the news flow we can expect, right? I mean, as you mentioned, March will be the proposed sort of date for the formal merger. What sort of news will we expect from Dolly Varden and Contango respectively prior to that date?
I'll start with Dolly Varden. We've got drill results pending, so we'll be getting out those drill results and the results that we have put out so far from the 2025 season. We were remarking on that same webinar that both companies have really dominated 2024, 2025 drill results in terms of grade thickness, right? So the results we've put out to date have been extraordinary. We've got a lot of assays pending. So for us, between now and the shareholder vote in February, it's more assays.
And Rick, any news out of Contango we can anticipate prior to merger?
Yeah, and obviously we just mentioned we're drilling 18,000 meters underground at Lucky Shot, so that will have sort of continuous news flow of results from that drilling. We were just put on the Fast 41 dashboard for our Johnson Tract project, so that's the boring part of the Lassonde curve as we spoke about. We will start building road next summer, and which we're fully permitted for, and we'll start mobilizing equipment to go underground. We expect to get our permits from the state of Alaska to start building the tunnel next summer, and so we'll mobilize the equipment. We'll get camp winterized, and if we can get all that done, then we can start on a year-round basis drilling and blasting the tunnel, and then getting the drills underground and continuing the infill and expansion drilling from underground. So lots and lots of news flow here, and of course we're expecting to have about a 50,000 meter drill program at and Dolly Varden's assets to continue to advance the both expansion and infill drilling and development of getting the information together to get a feasibility study done on a DSO model. And that sort of brings me back to one of the other things we're working on, which I think Shawn described how we got together, was talking about a potential mill to process our ore. That's how this discussion started. And that's still in the cards. So we're still having those discussions in the background. And so, that's something we'll be working on in 2026 to get to come to fruition. So, yeah, lots of news flow, and I'm really excited just to get going here.
Excellent, Jensen. I will avoid. I know you can't say anything about that. It's behind the corporate veil still, but that was a fairly juicy piece of news you just teased there, Rick. But I'll let that go. But no, interesting stuff. Yeah, no, guys, I appreciate the time. Yes, I'll just turn over to you one last chance for final thoughts here before we say goodbye. And Shawn, you want any final thoughts here before we turn off?
I'll just reiterate, some of the points here in terms of, this merger, makes a lot of sense, from a geographical consistency, from a grade profile, complementary skill sets. Bigger is better. Enhanced trading, shareholder base, the re-rating. But most importantly, I think, as Rick said it, we now have a nice 20-year plan. And for shareholders who want exposure to silver and gold in a safe jurisdiction, you've got two choices. You got the $10 billion Hecla, or you've got the sub $1 billion Contango Silver and Gold. That's just getting started and looking to grow.
Very good. And Rick, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, with a company that when we put these companies together, we'll have $100 million of cash in the bank. We'll be generating additional cash from our onshore operations, and we've got the team, we've got the assets, we've got the wind in our sails with the precious metal prices, and we've got the dollars to execute. So we got a lot of work to do, but I think the whole team is, the combined teams here are really eager just to get on with it and demonstrate we're going to displace Hecla.
Good. I like that. That's excellent. Aspirational. Well, good. No, Rick Van Nieuwenhuyse, CEO of Contango Ore, and Shawn Khunkhun, CEO of Dolly Varden Silver. Thank you for your time. It's pretty exciting news, and I've definitely been buying in the market. So I've been watching this one pretty closely and will continue to. So thank you guys, and we'll speak.